All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Todd from Kramer Tree Specialists. This is Beau. I want to thank Russo for letting us use their facility and make this video for the summer conference. And today we're going to talk about tree climbing competitions, the histories of it, what it's kind of all been about, and where it is today, and what it's meant for us and our co-workers and our organizations.
Yeah. We're also going to go a little bit into gear inspection after that, which will, as we go on, it all kind of fits together, and what we're trying to get through to everybody today about the benefits of participating in tree climbing comps and our personal experiences. I'm Beau Nagan. I work at Cantini Park. I'm the forestry manager there, and I'm also the Illinois Arborist Association president. So welcome to our summer conference, and thank you for participating. So do you want to talk a little bit about your experience in tree work? And
Sure. Yeah. So I've been doing this for 30 plus years, and I started competing in the early 90s. I don't remember if it was 92 or 93. And it's been a big part of my career, big part of our organization. I competed for 23 years, but have been involved in competitions for probably closer to 30.
I myself, I've been doing tree work since I was probably about 17, 18 years old, and I didn't get into tree climbing competitions till a little bit later. I grew up with in a family where my dad did landscaping, so he learned how to do tree work from a guy that learned it in the 40s or 50s, so everything was just shinny up the tree with no ropes and no safety, and not a great way to start, but it was where they came from. It was an ignorance thing, not a not an intentionally poor execution of work. So as I went on and started getting educated myself, I started experiencing. My younger brother went into doing tree climbing competitions actually before me, and he's like, come check this out. There's all these guys with these amazing techniques, and they're using ropes, and it's so fast and efficient. And I started going, and when I started, Todd actually was, he was like the local Michael Jordan of tree climbing. He was killing it at the time, man. So he was one of the guys that I was checking out, looking up to, and you think you're really good at something like tree climbing when you get there, right? And then you get to the climbing comps, and your whole world opens up as far as what the actual possibilities are, what you can do if you have a really good education, and you see everybody wearing all this equipment and stuff that everybody tells you're a wimp if you wear a hard hat, and then you see all these people that are way better at it than you wearing it, and you're like, well, maybe it's not that big of a deal. Maybe this isn't such a bad idea, working out good for these guys. So that was a big eye opener for me, and getting brought into that culture was really like a real sounding board for my career that really got me to a lot of places I don't think I would have got to if I had not participated.
Participating doesn't actually mean actually doing the actual participating as a competitor. You can participate as a volunteer.
Right.
You can technically participate as just watching. I know a lot of people are a little intimidated to participate in the beginning of their comp life.
Yeah.
So they just go and watch. Mm-hmm. So there's lots to it, but the competition has really changed over the years. When I first started competing, in the early 90s, there weren't the same rules there are now.
Right.
Because the anti-standards were different. Things have definitely evolved, and the competition started really as a jamboree.
Yeah.
Basically, kind of focusing around aerial rescue. First one I think was in '74, I think, in St. Louis. And when I first started. Like everybody, there'd be brand new hard hats. It's like we clearly weren't wearing these at work.
Right.
Like we'd have to go to the comp and it'd be like, oh man, where do those hard hats go from last year?
Find a vendor.
Yeah. So the competitions have greatly changed, and some of the benefits that it has is really endless. Like with social media nowadays, we hear these things, can you put a price on going to a competition? Is it worth it? And it's like you can't quantify a number of a price of how valuable a competition can actually be.
Yeah, and I think to kind of mirror what Todd said, I really feel like that intimidation about the comp is really unfounded. I think the most surprising thing when I started was 2007. I think was my first competition, and I had no experience with it, and I was really intimidated. And when you go there, it's just all about camaraderie and supporting each other. It's not like any athletic event I'd ever been to, especially in this region where everybody's so competitive. competitive with everything. You got Little League coaches yelling at each other like it's the World Series. So, you go to these comps and everybody's so supportive and they're cheering these people on they're supposed to be competing against, and you see somebody doing something new and different and you walk up to them and go, what's that? And you expect them to be like, I'm not going to show you, but then they tear it all apart and they show you how it works and why it works and how to do it safely, which I think is one of the most important things about comps, is when you get to see it in person and not on a chopped up YouTube video that you don't know that the guy did 6 other steps before he got to that end point. So, and that's something we're going to hit on probably quite a bit because, hands-on experience and training, and, it's not technically training exactly, but I used to always say, I learned more in the one day of comp every year than I did the rest of the year doing tree work.
Sure, yeah. And when I first started competing, it was actually my brother and I, in the early 90s, my father actually made us do it because at the time there was no training available.
Yeah.
It just didn't exist. So we were just simply learning from our crew leaders who learned from their crew leaders and so on and so on. So to progress in the industry with new skills, it really wasn't happening. Right. We were doing the exact same thing that they were doing 30 years ago and 50 years ago. So my father's like, you boys are going to go here and see what it's all about. And that would be the first one we ever went to. We just observed, but it was at the Morton Arboretum in 1989. And it was the International Tree Climbing Championship. Back then, the skills and techniques were kind of still the same. Right. But also, we learned about foot locking. Right. We've never even seen it before. They were doing it on the West Coast. They were doing it on the East Coast, but not in the Midwest. Like, wow, these guys are really something else. So then we started competing, and that was kind of an actual training platform where we got to see how other people were doing it. And like Beau mentioned, they weren't hiding it. Right. They were showing us how to do things just before we competed. Right. Can you set this up for me? And they would do that. Yeah. And then I got really hooked on it just because I'm a competitive person. I like to compete, and I like to see how Beau and I can go toe to toe. Let's see what happens. Yeah. And also the learning from people from all over the world. Right. Huge benefit. It's a huge networking skill set. So Beau and I, we have other arborists, if we have questions, and those questions could be about personnel, it could be about equipment, it could be about chainsaws, it could be about this new crane, what do you know about this, or what's this technique? But we've networked and now have arborist friends from the competition world all over the world. Sure. That nowadays we can do it on social media or texting or whatever. Yeah, it's funny you say that with I remember my first comp, it was still foot locking, and I remember being so excited that I just finished within the 1 minute. Because at one point. Yeah, I guess I got up there, because, and everybody, and those experiences when you're at the competition are actually the most exciting moments. When that new guy comes in and just barely finishes the event, but finishes it, it like energizes somebody. So, you expect the big finale to be the guy winning the comp, and that's great. But it's those little moments of those little victories for people that are just getting into it that are more exciting for everybody, because everybody remembers their first time at a comp where they're nervous and they feel like they're not going to finish, and those little victories are like everything. I think it was the same year, 2007. It could have been, but I remember I saw a young man. His name is Rob Cracker. He's Rob. Yeah. Great guy. Phenomenal arborist. Phenomenal athlete. He was nervous. It was his first comp, and he's coming up to the footlock event. And if you've never been to a competition, a footlock event is just pure speed. And he has his full plethora of equipment on his harness. Right. I mean, everything. He's got. I'm like, he's getting a workout. Yeah, but it's his first comp. Right. He didn't know. He didn't know. So he's getting ready to go. And I don't know him. And, it's like, stop, everybody stop. Right. I'm like, what are you doing? Yeah. He's like, I'm getting ready, I'm nervous. I'm like, you don't need all this. All you need is a carabiner and figure 8. Yep. He had his handsaw. Oh, yeah. He had everything he could drop, too. Right? Lanyard, he had all this stuff. Oh, I don't need to take this? No. Yep. And then he's like, thank you so much for helping me out. I'm like, he's like, I thought you'd wait till after, so a slower time. I'm like, that's not what this is about. Right. This is about everybody moving up the ladder. Yeah, and those little, and I think Rob ended up working for you. Yes, he did. So it's another one of those examples where you get people in their early experiences, you create all these relationships that then lead to employment opportunities and also recruiting opportunities where you meet these young people that they might not have all the skills yet, but you see all that potential. And more importantly, if somebody's going to the competition, they have the drive to get better on their own. Yeah. As Todd and I were just talking about this the other day on the phone, one of the
biggest problems in the industry right now is finding employees. Always a problem, right? Staffing, right, is always so hard. And one of the things we discussed is that, everybody wants to climb because it looks easy, right? It's like one of the hardest things that you have to do. And they're like, oh, I want to do it. And you're like, I wish I could just let you do it so you can see how hard it is. But, when we talk about that, what really drove our careers is working on it, not at work. It's like doing that homework where you got into the competition, so you went out and you started practicing all these techniques, and it became part of your regimen of training and working out. And one of the things that teaches you when you go to these comps is that, it takes more than just showing up to work every day if you really want to be great at what you do. And, if you don't, you can still be a great arborist and be trained and work every day, and that's fine. But, if you really want to get to that higher level and improve yourself, it's going to take that extra work. And it's something that the comps really teach you in a hurry. If you think you're, already a great climber and you get there and there's nothing wrong with being a hardworking climber, that's what you do your job, you go home, that's great. But, you kind of start to see what it takes if you want to get to that next level.
Yeah, and what I realized in those first few years, especially my brother won the Illinois chapter 7 years in a row. So we got to go, him and I, to the internationals all 7 of those years. No, we didn't go the first year because it was in Oakland, California, and at the time they weren't funding it.
Right.
So 6 of them we went to, and what I kind of found really interesting, again, there was basically no training available.
Yeah.
And a couple things that I found interesting were I could watch a competitor, particularly in the Masters Challenge. That was always what I really focused on, was learning during a Masters Challenge, because that's like all the techniques and all the skills kind of wrapped up into one event. And I would watch somebody, I'm like, I am just as strong as that person. I'm just as physically fit. I'm just as flexible. Yet there's no way I could have done what that person just did, because I didn't understand how they did the techniques they used, the equipment they used. I didn't have a clue. So a benefit from the competition is meeting people like that, and then learning from them. But we're not going to a YouTube video that's chopped up and incorrect. You're getting actual training. And it's free.
And it's free.
And these, when this person's from this part of the country, this person's from that part of the country, so that they don't care if you know their technique. Right? So I would see them outperform me based on knowledge, not based on physical skill. And then I would learn those techniques, and like Beau mentioned, sometimes you got to do this stuff off the clock. I would practice these techniques, make sure I have the right place for them, make sure I have the right configuration of the equipment, and then eventually bring that to work. Because people think that, and I've heard this many times, that there's production tree work and there's competition tree work, and in my opinion, they're completely the same. At work, obviously, you're not going to go up as fast as you can.
I think the answer is that they're completely the same if you're doing it right. You know what I mean? I've seen people throw the kitchen sink at a master's climb they didn't need to. But if you're doing it right, it should mirror what you do at work.
Right. So you can learn these techniques. It's like I can now perform my work safer, for sure, a foundation, That's the big one. But I got a quality product for our clients, and I'm being productive. All from just learning these techniques at a competition and practicing them. And I always practice them off the clock before I brought them to work, because I might get a piece of gear stuck, or this is not the right technique. This did not work.
Yeah, and I think, let's backtrack a little bit here. For those of you that haven't ever competed in a tree climbing championship, it consists of 5 events, preliminary. So we have a throw line competition that gives you 6 minutes, and there's various targets in 2 different trees or 2 halves of a tree, and you have to select one target on each side or each tree, and then you install a throw line, isolate it, get a rope in, and that's maximum points, and then you get the second rope, and that's the best you could do, the 2 highest and the 2 up. So that's one of our events, so that obviously you can't climb unless you can get into the tree. Another event would be the blade speed event, which used to be secured footlock. So when we both started, were you unsecured footlock when you started? Okay, so it used to just be footlock, so you weren't even technically tied in, right? You just foot locked up. Were you belayed?
We were belayed.
Okay, so you're belayed, but you didn't have to be tied tied in a long time ago. Now, of course, you have to be tied in. But we used to do secure foot lock. So that would be, if you're not familiar with foot locking, basically you tie a type of pressic on two sides of a rope, and you push the knot up, and then you reach your feet up, and you grasp the rope with your feet, and then you kind of inchworm up, right? And that, it's a very simplified version of what it is. And then it's just a pure speed event. You had 1 minute to complete it. I think that, what's the record still? 13.8 seconds or something like that? Or
Patrick, yeah, 13 something.
Yeah, so that's moving, man. And that guy, I always call James Turbo Sloth, because he looks like he's moving real slow because he's so smooth, but you're like, oh, he's done. Yeah. That's it. Like, makes it look so easy. But so that, that's has evolved into into open ascent, which allows you to use whatever ascent techniques you want. But there are speed components, and I'm not going to go into it. You can read the rule book for that. But essentially, it's still put ascenders on whatever rope walking or whatever type of climbing system you'd like to use to ascend as quickly as possible. You can still footlock if you want to.
Sure.
So that's another event. And then we have belayed speed, which is I would say it's about as close to like a rock wall speed climbing competition as possible, but with a tree. Where it's like that. You're just using structure more than the rope to climb the tree and get to a bell at the top. And it's another timed event. So we have 2 speed events. We have the throw line event, and then we have the aerial rescue event, which I think is
one of the most important events.
Right.
Yeah, the aerial rescue event I think is really important, and it scores more points than the speed events or the throw line.
Can't even talk about more.
Yeah, it's just a more important event.
Yeah,
that's why it's scored more though. But that's an important part. I mean, I've never had to do an aerial rescue. I've never seen a real one ever done before. But it's a great way to be prepared in the event of the unfortunate.
Right.
And there's so many different ways to do it, and nowadays there's so many different climbing techniques and the equipment people are using. It's a great way to get familiar with that equipment.
Right.
In case you have a coworker using some kind of a technique that you're not familiar with.
Well, we talk about that all the time, is be familiar with your crew systems. Otherwise, when that emergency happens, you're not prepared. Yeah. And for me, aerial rescue, that portion of the competition, it's a competition, so it's all, it's pre-baked, it's all set up already. It's straightforward, but what it does for you is it puts all of those proper emergency steps in your brain, right? So,
emergency response.
Right, emergency response. So you determine, like, is there an emergency? Does this person need help? If so, immediately call 911. And it hammers all of those steps into your head. So you get this script in your head, which seems contrived, but in reality, in an emergency, if that's already grilled into your brain, you're going to do it right when you need to.
Yeah, it'd be muscle memory.
Right, right, which is really important, because it takes, anybody that's been in a big emergency knows that you get very flustered. There's a ton of adrenaline. And if that's already all, pre-programmed in your head, it's all going to go a lot smoother. And the more people on the crew that do it, the less likely that everybody's going to have a meltdown at the same time and somebody's going to react properly. So I think that's possibly.
It's an interesting event to watch too, because people are trying to come up with different solutions, even though it's the same problem. So you get to watch all these different solutions to the same problem, and you think yours is right. Well, that one looked a little bit better, but that one looked way too complex.
Sure.
This one looked very simple, and this one looked safe.
Sure.
So you can figure out which one checks the boxes that you're looking for.
Right. And then, of course, work climb, which is, I think, probably the most fun. It's, race to the bottom of the tree, so you start at the top. There's, how many stations we had? 4 stations? 4 stations, you get a handbell station, you go to a station, you lanyard in, call stand clear, you hit it, hit the bell with your handsaw that has no teeth on it or is taped up for safety. And then you have your limb toss, which we have a small, like, baby pool or garbage can or something on the ground. You go lanyard in, ring a bell, you got 2 tosses, you try and throw the stick in the container on the ground for maximum points. You get 2 shots, then you move on. Then you have your limb walk, where you have a plumb bob at the end of the branch. So the more weight you put on that, the lower or higher it goes, and you have to keep it now centered. Used to be you just had to make sure it didn't go too low.
Right.
Now it can't go too high or too low, because we used to just wrench that branch up as high as we could. But it's all about keeping that balance and having your weight on your system as opposed to on the structure of the tree, which is great training for not damaging trees when you're working or having accidents.
It's all about balance. It's all about posture.
Right.
It's all about being smooth and being in control and being confident.
Sure. And then we have the pole saw station, where you get out there and you lanyard in, and there's a pole saw which gives you that practice of, if you're going to use a pole saw on the tree, it's secured, and then you utilize it. You call stand clear whenever you're removing anything, and there's loose gear, which is good practice, not just for cutting and climbing, but for rigging as well. When you're taking a block off and setting, you let everybody know. I've heard a lot of stories of people getting hit with things like that are heavy and dangerous. So it's a good practice, all the call and response safety that, to be honest with you, I never did till I started competing.
Right.
That's how you start learning it and getting it grilled in. Oh, I did personally anyway. And then and then of course there's the landing station where there's a tape line somewhere on the tree. You can't drop your feet past it. It's called stand clear. You ring a bell. And then you kick off the tree and you try and land in 1 meter and 2 meter circles, and there's points based on where your feet land.
It's the funnest event for sure.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch. It's fun to do.
Yep.
Outside the Masters Challenge, it mimics tree work the most.
Right.
And that scores the highest points in the preliminary events. Now, one thing we didn't mention about aerial rescue is a timed event, but time does not affect your points.
It does a little bit now, but not substantially.
It's
minimal. It's like
so
a few.
minimal.
Yeah.
The other 2 speed events are actually all speed, and then with work climb, speed is a
big factor.
It's a big factor in
30
scoring.
points or something like that.
Yeah. It's been a while.
I think aerial rescue, in fact, the best guys at aerial rescue almost would pride themselves on using all of their time. Getting all of the points, because when it comes to emergency response, being thorough and safe is far more important than being fast if it's not a immediate life-ending injury.
Exactly, and that's on the spreadsheet, it's on the score sheet.
Right.
It's all about emergency response, and it's all about packaging the patient.
Right.
It's not about getting them down. And back in the day when it all started, that whole event started with that in 4 minutes. Now there's 5, and the reason it was 4 minutes is because it came from the line clearance industry.
Right.
Where they wanted to get that patient to the ground within 4 minutes so he can start CPR to prevent brain damage. And then as the competition evolved, it's like, wait a minute, and especially when professional rescue people got involved, like, no, stop doing that.
Right.
There should not be a time limit.
Right.
This is bad. So the competition is definitely constantly evolved. There's new rules every year. And that's one thing, that's the biggest advice I've always had for new competitors. And I've seen so many competitors come in who are very, very competent, very strong climbers, but they actually don't know the rules.
Yeah, read the rule book.
And they lose a ton of points. And then they get frustrated. Like, well, I climbed better than that guy. Like, yeah, but you didn't have your verbals down. You didn't say stand clear.
Right.
You didn't do these things.
Yeah. Those are the big difference you see in the, and you get to the Masters Challenge. We discussed a lot of events that involve a lot of athleticism and speed. What I usually tell people is, like, young men win prelims and old men win Masters challenges. If you can make it to the Masters, the experience goes a long way.
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah. The hard part is when you start having trouble getting to the Masters challenge.
That's me.
It's all of us. The throw line will kill you too. Even on your best day.
And the speed climbs.
And the speed climbs. And then you want to talk a little bit about Masters Challenge? You have the most experience here.
Yeah. Masters Challenge to me is just a fantastic event.
So the top 3 competitors, well, it's based on
how many competitors.
Yeah, depending on how many competitors, your top 3, 4, or 5 competitors get to go to the Masters Challenge, which is...
The Masters Challenge is fun. So it's an event that kind of takes all the prelims and kind of puts them all together. I think it's the one that replicates work the most. So there's going to be 4 stations in a tree. You're sequestered. So, like, whoever wins the prelims, they get to choose when they want to go, first, second, third, or fourth, and so on down the line. So the competitors can't watch the other competitors.
Yeah, I would say when I do it, I kind of describe it as you tell the story of what you're doing as you go.
Yeah.
Because they can't read your mind, right? Because a lot of times, I'm sure this is happening. I think it's happened to everybody. There's always a really challenging station that's a real difficult rope angle. And I feel like every time right before you put your lanyard on to be safe, they're like, hey, make sure you put your lanyard on. You're like, God, I was just about to. Like, sure you were. But it's all about, they don't know unless you communicate. So, it's like, sometimes I'll even be like, I'm going to step up on this branch, throw my lanyard on. You tell the story as you do the climb. And you don't want to overdo it. One of the best advice I ever got was from my younger brother, Cormac, that started competing before me. He's also a fantastic climber.
Absolutely.
He told me once, he's like, Beau, one trick per tree. Like, if you're going to do something fancy, just one. Because if you go too deep in the woods with too much gear, you're going to run out of time. Yeah. And it's also usually not necessary. Like, when you go to work, you try and use as little as possible. Efficiency is light equipment. You don't want to leave a lot behind. You want to do it as streamlined as possible. And when it comes to the Masters Challenge, and actually all the prelim events, when you think about it, it's the easiest tree work you ever do. Somebody already pruned all the trees for you. When you do throw line, they prune most of the stuff out of there. It's the easiest throw you'll do all year. When you go to do the Masters Challenge, you get up there, it's been cleaned out. Like, all of the things that you think are intimidating, you work doing tree work for a living. When you get up that Masters Challenge tree, you go, you know what?
really isn't that bad. You know, you get up there and you're like, if you get past the nerves, it's really just a lot of fun once you get up there. And that's all about, having that extra training that you do and the comfort, and a lot of the course is always going to be experience. But I guess the reason why I mentioned that is that the biggest thing I hear from people is they're intimidated to do it.
Yeah,
they think it's going to be
that way. It's not that environment.
Nothing like that. There's no chest pounding or whatnot. Everybody's just there like, come on in, buddy. Let me show you. Welcome. It's really great. And one of the things when you mentioned about the judges, what I like. Some chapters will do with the Master Challenge is they'll have a out-of-state climber do it first, which is great if you have time. A lot of chapters we do it in one day, so it's hard to fit it in. But when you got that one climber, then you can mess up on the guy that it doesn't matter, because you obviously can't win when you're out of chapter. So that's a good option too, and fun to see too.
And all those judges are volunteering,
right?
So it's not perfect.
No,
it's not perfect. Can it be a little biased? Sure.
Yeah.
Did I get Todd Kramer points? Because I was Todd Kramer? Probably.
Sure.
And it's that way at every chapter. It's that way at the international level. But yes, it's a competition. It's about competing, but it's much bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's much bigger than that. And some of the things that, particularly back to a Masters Challenge, that I've seen, to your point of one trick, or I wouldn't even call it a trick though. It's to be a technique.
Technique, yeah.
But I'm always looking for a very simple solution to a complex problem.
Right.
And I've seen some competitors have a complex situation they're trying to solve, and they make it more complex.
Right.
And I've seen other people come up with just very, very simple solutions.
Right.
I'm like, wow, that's what I want.
That's when you're like, I'm gonna use that at work too.
Yes,
that's the take home.
Right. So there's so many benefits to competing, and I think one of the big benefits again is that basically that free training, where I've done this myself. I'm sure you have though, but we'll see like some kind of a technique at a competition, whether it's a Masters Challenge, it'd either be a Master Challenge or Aero Rescue.
Right.
One of those two things. And we don't clearly learn it, but we think we got it. We go home and we try to mimic it.
Yeah.
And we don't do it correctly.
No.
And then we might have been doing something wrong for quite a while.
Yeah.
So one of the advantages of a competition is maybe you see that technique, you can go right up to that competitor.
Sure.
And say,
Yeah.
Let me see.
Right.
And they'll be more than happy to show you.
Yeah. And that's where the internet does come in handy, because then you hit them up on Messenger or Facebook,
Sure.
or Instagram or whatever. Be like, hey man, you remember this thing you did? You showed me, and then they're always going to get right back.
They're going to get right back to you.
It doesn't matter how big you think they are in your head, or how new you are to it. They're going to get back to you. Like I've never had somebody go, hey Beau, how do you do that? And be like, I'm not telling you.
Yeah, right.
Just get right back to them, because more importantly, we all know that the biggest thing about all this is safety, right? That's why it all started: learning aerial rescue, learning safe climbing techniques. So why would you not get back to somebody to make their life safer? Like, you don't want somebody to put themselves in harm's way by giving them misinformation. So you're going to get right back to them on that as quickly as possible before they do something foolish with it and make a mistake. So we take it very seriously, but it's also really fun. And these relationships you build, like if you're lucky enough to either make it to internationals, or you go volunteer at internationals, then that opens your whole world up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's incredible.
World.
I mean, you meet people from around the world, and each country kind of has like a different way they look at tree work and a different approach, which kind of just totally kind of blows your whole concept of tree work open, where you're like, wow, like I didn't even consider that. Like I guess in my head, one of the more unique, some of the French climbers, I feel like they have like a very kind of specific style, especially with the way they do like a double single. But they do all sorts of things that it's like, wow, I never even thought of that. And a lot of that comes from these cultures that have a lot more alpine experience and grading, just things that maybe where you're from, it's just not the experience that you grew up with, and it really becomes an invaluable resource as an industry professional and a climber. And the development that you get out of that is kind of almost unbelievable.
And I recommend committing to going to the internationals. People might not have the time off of work; they have families.
Right.
It's almost always in the U.S. somewhere.
Yeah.
I think it is going.
It's going to go international, but you just keep an eye out for when it's going to be the closest. Probably.
Yeah, and if that's just not available and it's too far away, obviously your chapter, right? Definitely get involved. They always need more volunteers.
Sure.
I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah.
You definitely need more volunteers, and you don't need to be a competitor to be a volunteer.
Right.
You can be a manager. You can be, and you're going to learn a ton of stuff.
Right.
Just by being a volunteer. But also, like as Beau mentioned, regions are different. So you see like a climbing style in Indiana, the bulk of it's probably going to be different than what you're going to get in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be using different tools, potentially different techniques. So do that little bit of traveling. Go, get a hotel for a night
Yeah.
and drive to 300 miles or whatever,
Yeah.
and go to another chapter because there's a whole new group of people there.
I mean, I mentioned my brother a couple times, but he lives in North Carolina, and his climbing is completely different than mine because he's climbing these trees that are significantly bigger because of the growing season, and he's climbing these willow oaks. And when he first moved out there, he was in the Raleigh-Durham area, so those these 125-foot loblolly pines. I don't climb anything like that around here. So you get all these different outlooks on how to approach things, whether that be climbing or rigging or whatnot, and you get to have all those conversations with people, which might not apply to you every day, but that one out-of-the-box tree is an everyday tree for them. So they give you these solutions that are prepackaged, tried and tested, and then you don't have to like go through the drudgery of figuring it out and being inefficient and losing money. And that's just it's another little add-on bonus to it.
And so that's a lot of history of the competition. It's a lot of our history. Like I mentioned, I competed for 23 years. I missed 1 year because I had a broken collarbone, 97 or 98.
Yeah. And how many times did you go to internationals?
10 times, competing 10 times. But I went there. If I didn't compete internationally, I still volunteered.
Yeah.
So I've been to every international tree climbing championship pretty much since the early 90s.
Wow. Yeah.
I think I missed 2 though. One, we had a huge storm and I couldn't make it. Seattle. Or no, it was Oregon or something.
Portland.
Portland.
The
You
one
did
that I
well
went.
there.
Yeah.
You did well there.
Yeah, I had a good run. That was my first year at internationals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's the first or second one I ever missed. I forget I missed 2 of them.
yeah.
But just endless amounts of benefits. So we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna show you the importance of gear inspection.
Right.
All right, welcome back. We're going to now talk about gear inspection. So there's been a long history of gear inspections where your gear needs to get inspected before you compete. And the way it works now is you get sent, if you are a competitor, you'll get sent paperwork and you're supposed to inspect your gear before you get there and you actually document it.
Right.
So one of the things that I've learned, I think a lot of people have learned through tree climbing competitions is, okay, we get our gear inspected, and at the very beginning, back when I first started competing, things didn't always pass.
Right.
And then as the years went on, we became more competent in maintaining our equipment. Sure. And then it got to the point of, I remember for many years, people I'd be competing against, oh man, I got to spend the whole night inspecting my gear. And it was like, I never had to do that for most of my competition career. I would literally grab my equipment from work that I used the day before and bring it to the competition. I pretty much had no problems with that because I was inspecting it constantly as I was working. That's one of the things you're taught as a competitor.
It's one of the things that's in the ANSI standards too. Is you inspect everything before you climb.
Which is how you interpret that. Like when I put my rope away is when I'm inspecting it, but that's before the next use.
Right, which is the most efficient way to do it because you're putting it away and then you have to pull it out again.
But just the whole time I'm using my equipment, I know that this carabiner is not working properly, and then I go ahead and not use it and or fix it.
Right.
Or replace it if I need to. So as you go through this gear inspection, it is very thorough. So we're gonna like mimic one here. I'm gonna be the inspector. Beau's gonna be the competitor, and we should be able to get to most things of what we're gonna what we're gonna be looking at. The first thing we look at is PPE, the personal protective equipment.
Can't climb without it.
Right. So we're gonna thorough inspection. Right. So you have to have a pair of safety glasses. They have to be ZA7 or ZA7 plus. The inspector is going to look for that. You can't show up with your Oakleys.
Right.
Right. So somewhere on here, and just so everybody knows, when you turn 50, so do your eyes. So somewhere on here it says ZA7.
No, it says there. I'll find it. I'm not 50 yet, so man, it's pretty hard.
That one's a little hard to see.
Yeah, like there it is, right there on that one, right on the arm. Yeah, Z87 right there. Plus, made in Taiwan. Yeah. So. And a little bit about that is what that is it's got a certain level of shatter. It's not going to shatter resistance, and also it covers a certain percentage of your face.
Yeah, it's wraparound protection that's shatter resistant. Yeah.
Yep.
Always wear your safety glasses.
Yep.
They come in a million different styles, right?
Sure.
So this is a hard hat. This is Beau's hard hat. So I'm going to definitely be inspecting this. And one thing I want to try to figure out is the age. I obviously know this is a brand new helmet.
Yeah, it's very new.
But I definitely recommend a tip from Norm Hall is when you do you put a new hard hat into service, market
Right.
with a date. Because really, you get 5 years.
Yep.
So inspecting this hard hat, I'm looking for suspension. This style of hard hat is a different type of suspension. But it's got the foam layer.
Right.
So I'm just looking at the nuts and bolts and pieces are all where they should be.
Yeah, and, you know, Todd's grabbing and checking. One of the things you'll find with those foam hard hats is the foam will detach,
Yep.
and you know, sometimes it's not too bad, but when it gets really old, it's like just flopping around in there, and it's
Yep.
no good.
No good.
You know, so you really have to make sure everything's working properly and not overly worn, so it has that functionality.
And as they get older, they could easily crack. So one thing you want to do is just gently push on the sides and listen for some cracking, right?
Right.
I have definitely seen that before.
Right.
Where I'd be inspecting my coworkers' equipment because inspecting your gear is not just for competitions.
No.
This is for work.
Yeah.
Right. So, crack. Like, that's an old one.
Yep. There you go.
You're gonna need a new one.
So
this one does have eye protection built into it, and as far as I know, this probably does meet the Z.
it does, as long as it's down. So
Yeah,
in the
there's that.
States, you have to have it down the whole time you're
Yep.
climbing. And I think in the UK, or not the UK, I'm sorry, I think in parts of Europe, you can have it up if you're not making a cut. But here in the States, I think you have to wear it the entire time you're climbing.
Yeah. Well, when we get out of the truck, you need eye protection.
Right.
So that's all there is to it. So
That's why I personally, I have that. I like to wear that when I'm flushing a stump or making a big cut, but I like the safety glasses, you know, most
I
of the
like
time.
both because I have just a tinted visor. I have a helmet similar to this. Doing a lot of crane work, so a lot of sawdust, lots of removal. So windy days, the visor I think is great.
Yeah.
And it's very light. We're also going to inspect footwear. Where I'm not going to actually do that though.
Right.
But making sure you have boots on that are fit for purpose.
Right.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't have.
Gym shoe on.
Yeah.
And basically, it's about ankle coverage and, you know.
covers your ankle bone,
Yeah.
and it's just fit for purpose.
Yep.
And in that gear inspection sheet, there's just a checklist you go down. So I don't remember the exact order of it, but I know it starts with
PP's at the top for sure.
It's at the top.
Yeah.
But so I'm just going to kind of mimic it. So the first thing I want to see is a harness.
Right.
Now this is Beau's harness, and during the break he was going to bring it up, and I'm going to inspect it, but he had all his tools still on there. I'm like, as an inspector, I'm not dealing with that.
Right.
I'm here to inspect right now just the harness, right? So I don't want distractions of all these other tools, right? So
More importantly, when you're doing an inspection, you have to deconstruct everything so you can look at all the parts of the tool, especially with rope tools, because you have to be able to see the entire tool.
yeah, and another thing that's kind of interesting about gear inspection is the more you do it, the more you end up kind of forced to learn about the equipment.
Right.
There's many different harnesses, many different ropes, so you end up learning about rope construction. You end up learning about how things are produced, how they're made, and how they integrate with each other.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And when you run the same harness all the time, you start finding like the portions of the harness that are the wear points that you really have to make sure. I mean, you have to inspect the whole thing, but there's certain points you have to inspect more often than others.
Yeah.
So
the first thing I'm going to be looking for though is just the life support portions. If there's a comfort portion of the harness that's kind of tore up, I don't care.
No.
Right.
No. Yep.
I'm just looking for the life support. So this harness comes with a rope bridge. So I'm double checking the stopper knots so they're actually tied properly. Now I think this harness, they also comes with stitching, but you can cut the stitching on one end to shorten or lengthen the bridge.
Correct.
Yeah.
And obviously you have to replace the bridge, which you should do minimally once a year.
Minimally once a year.
Twice a year is probably a better idea.
And depending on how much you use it and how it wears.
It's also a cheap piece and it's your life.
Yes.
So,
And things that I've seen at gear inspections with harnesses that I've seen chapters pass them and stuff is where the competitor replaces the bridge, whether it's a rope bridge or a webbing bridge, with a different type of material or a different type, something the manufacturer
didn't recommend.
This manufacturer only recommends this, that's it.
Right.
You can't replace this with something else.
Correct.
Because it was never tested in that configuration.
Right. And there was actually years ago, there was an issue with that where they had picked a specific cordage that was actually a lot stronger, but what they didn't realize is due to how strong it was self-abrading. So by putting a ring on it and running it over and over again, it failed, which no one knew because no one had ever used it for that purpose before. Right. So it's something where, simply by making the mistake of being like, well, this is stronger, I'm going to use that, doesn't necessarily mean it functions better, right?
Yep, absolutely. So I'm looking at the D-rings. So these are there's Allen nuts, making sure they're totally flush all the way in. This bridge does not look like it has any type of excessive wear. And then we're looking at all the webbing. So with this particular harness, the webbing here is often what I see that wears out first.
Definitely.
Which is a replaceable part.
Cheap too.
Unless it's the leg ones.
Right, the leg ones are a bit pricier.
Right,
but
so
the leg ones always seem to they wear a little bit slower. But this top one right here, that's the point where I feel like you get the most wear out of that.
Yeah, so I'm really focusing on the suspension right now. And that's how this harness works. And then, of course, the webbing that goes behind it, there's 4 pieces of webbing. So those are all technically life support. Right. So I'm giving that a nice once over, making sure all those pieces and parts are there.
Yeah. And if you need to, I got the first aid kit on there. You pull that off too, and get a look at all of that. And of course, it's gonna fight me, but that way you can see that strap all the way through.
Yep. So that all looks like it's in good shape. And then you have your work positioning D-rings, right? Green is go, red is not. That's how this harness works. It's just aluminum, it looks fine. These are also work positioning D-rings, which you clearly like to use a lot.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And with aluminum attachment points, make sure when you're choosing your equipment, you choose compatible equipment. So if we have life support connections that are all aluminum, make sure you're using aluminum carabiners, because those steel carabiners put in the same place are going to dig a groove in that aluminum connection point. And it's going to increase the wear is going to be significantly faster and cause you a lot of problems.
And we're also checking the buckles. These are 2-way buckles, so making sure they get the double clip.
Right. So it's always, make sure that they connect on both sides. Yep. That's a mistake that's easy to make, is to just attach one portion of the buckle, have attach on there. Another really important thing with any harness is making sure that it's within the lifespan of the harness. They all have I don't know about all of them. Most of them have a recommended lifespan for the harness per the manufacturer. So you want to make sure you locate the tag on the harness and the manufacturer date to make sure that it's within that. And that might change too. Occasionally they will alter that over the years, but whatever the recommendation when that's purchased is what you're going to have to follow per the manufacturer.
Yeah, and it's one of the biggest limitations that I've seen with arborists is they buy a new piece of equipment, whether it's a PPE, a hard hat, whether it's a new rope or a new harness or new technique. These equipment, there's a manufacturer's recommendation, and there's a book. It comes with a book. Read the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all in there. It's all in there. Just like the rules to the competition. That's the first step, is to go ahead and read that.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is funny, because Todd said that to me once, and I realized I had not read the book. I just asked everybody questions, which will get you only so far.
Yeah, you want to know the rules for one, and you want to know where the points are.
That's right. So
in the rule book, there's the actual judge's scoring sheet.
Sure.
So you can see where the points are, where you can get points.
Yeah.
Because it's competition.
And then, the nice thing about the competition with the gear inspection sheet, though, is you can use that gear inspection sheet at work.
That's what we do.
Give it to your guys, right? It's really straightforward. It's already there for you, and it's free.
Yeah. So the next piece of equipment I want to look at is work positioning lanyard. It's an ANSI standard. You have to have one while climbing. It's obviously a standard while you're competing.
Sure.
So I'm just going to start with connecting links. So in this case, he's using carabiners for connecting links. Now here in the U.S., you could use snaps. I don't recommend
double
that
locking.
Personally.
Yeah, or triple locking rather. But
so with that carabiner, every carabiner, in this case, I'm making sure it's configured correctly, meaning we're not side loading the gate or not side loading the spine over here. So Beau put on a constrictor, so this really can't get misconfigured. And with carabiners that are basically in a symmetrical oval, they have a really good load settling point. So when this is on a D-ring, it's really, really hard to load it incorrectly.
I'm just OCD like that.
Yeah. And then of course I'm checking the gate. So this is a double auto locking carabiner, 2 separate motions to open the gate. It has to lock automatically. And I'm going to check. We won't have time now, but every single component I'm going to be inspecting.
Right.
So I'm going to first just operate the gate, make sure it locks. Then I'm just going to open it just a little tiny bit and see if it locks. Then I'll open it all the way, make sure it locks. Because what's going to happen with a manufacturer, and it's all manufacturers, sometimes the springs, they get the timing wrong, where the outside of the gate, as it rotates prematurely and it catches on the actual nose. So like I've seen some of my carabiners where this side of the nose is all deformed kind of because the carabiner, the timing is just happened to be off.
Right.
There's no fixing that. So this one's a little slower.
A little sticky.
It's not sticky, it's just slower.
It's also, you can see it's an older model. That carabiner is older. So I think DMM recommends washing your carabiners with soap and water.
Or WD-40.
Yeah. I think
The
days of powdered graphite are done. Yeah, that discovered that it had been clogging up our carabiners and causing us a lot more harm than good. So I think they like 3-in-1 oil, duck oil.
Yep.
So
WD-40.
Just, when you use any of those products, just make sure you keep them off any of your ropes.
Yep.
We don't want to get any of that stuff on our ropes. It could cause deterioration, and it could also, it just adds to more dirt collection, obviously.
In this particular manufacturer, the gate functions a little differently. You got to press this green button, then you turn it, so it's still double auto locking. So just follow the exact same process.
Another real obvious one, obviously, when we're looking at carabiners, is you want look at them from the side, make sure that somebody didn't, use this for some ridiculous activity and bend it and deform it in a way. Maybe they used it for rigging or something like that.
You can push on the gate, because I've seen the gates kind of be deformed or cracked here from improper use.
Especially when they used to be plastic years ago, the Petzl ones, and they had that was the number one thing we checked, right?
Yeah.
So.
Then of course the textiles, I'm checking all the textiles from head to toe. So this is terminated by stitching. That stitching is protected with this plastic cover, this heat shield. So all that stitching looks like it's in good form. You have a pressic on here, which is an inline anchor. Why? Oh God.
Because I obviously don't use it that much.
Right. So just giving this a once over, making sure all these textiles are there. Again, this is stitched again. I can see the stitch pattern here.
Right.
That all looks good to me. This is obviously you've had to replace this and this recently.
Yeah, nicked it.
Yeah. So this is all pretty much brand new.
This is all part of my gear inspection.
Yeah.
So
Same thing here. We have stitched terminations on this pressic. This pressic's brand new. Very little use.
And all these stitched friction cords have a date of manufacture on them, because they all have a lifespan. So you have to check with the manufacturer. I think a lot of the tech cords used for hitch cord are 3 years, but you have to double check and just make sure what the lifespan is. Because the biggest thing that damages our cordage is UV light. So just using it, just being out in the sun is going to damage it more than a lot of other things. So
now with any rope, and we'll go through that in a second though, but you're going to run your hand down it, not just a visual inspection, because you can feel deformations, right? Now this particular rope is engineered and built just for the purpose of a work positioning lanyard. So it does have a termination on this side also.
Right.
Which I use the exact same cordage, which is nice, and you nick something here, and I use the longer one, I use the 7-meter one.
Right.
And just switch ends.
Yep.
Because we have a termination on both sides. Yeah. So I'll let you use this.
All right, thanks. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So we did work positioning lanyard. Now we're going to do actual work positioning. So I'm going to need some climbers will use a climbing line and an access line. Some will just use a climbing line. Sometimes they'll bring a couple. Maybe I don't need a 200-foot rope for work climb. I only want to deal with a 120-foot rope, whatever. So, but the first thing I want to see is, your rope.
Yep. All right. Well,
where is it?
Where? There it is.
Oh, here it is.
There it is.
This is actually my rope.
That's his rope, actually. Yeah. So we'll go this and this.
So with inspecting the rope, the gear inspectors are gonna start at the beginning and go all the way to the end, the entire rope. So this is terminated by a hand splice, and it's tagged.
Right.
They're gonna look for that. If there's no tag on there, they might have questions. Like I know a lot of people do their own splicing, but in a competition, depending on the chapter or whoever's in charge, they might not accept that.
Right. I usually, if my tag comes off or if I don't like it because of functionality, I'll keep it in the bag.
There you go.
So that I can show them.
Yep. And then I'm again running my hand across the entire length of the rope while visually inspecting it, but the running your hand across it, you're going to get more success of finding something.
Another really important thing, especially when we're talking about hand splices, to make sure that your vendor is certified, is getting certified splices based on the manufacturer. Like Russo's, all their splices are done by certified splicers that are certified with that particular manufacturer, because each manufacturer has specific criteria on how that has to be spliced. And just because it has the same construction doesn't necessarily mean that it's spliced exactly the same way. You might have two 24-strand ropes, and they may be identical in construction, but due to that material and the way it slips under a dynamic load, they may have to be spliced completely differently. So you have to make sure that you're buying from a reputable vendor that is making sure that all that criteria is met before they purchase a splice. Because that is a tiny little splice that is supporting your life every day at work. You don't want to mess around with that.
Yeah, we don't do any splicing at work, and we don't let any of our employees bring a splice product. I would much rather pay somebody. You save all these?
Yeah.
Okay. So this rope is in fine shape.
And then another thing is Todd had a stopper knot at the end of his rope. That way, if he runs out of rope in the tree and doesn't realize it, it's going to obviously stop before it pulls through his system and he falls to the ground. A really straightforward safety precaution, but something that is really important to be done, obviously.
And then the inspectors are not going to put your rope away.
That's true. They're not going to
do that because they have a lot to inspect, but they also, the rope, you go to compete and the rope comes out the wrong way.
Then you're blaming them for it.
Then you're blaming them, right?
Yep. And yet again, we don't want to put any undue stress on these volunteers that are there giving their time either. So these guys got a million people to go through. They're doing us a big favor just by being there, letting us go have fun in all these trees that they pruned and they set up and did all this great stuff so we could have a good time. So you remember that as a climber, that you're a guest being taken care of by all these great arborists that are just go ahead and doing all this stuff for you. Like Todd, he doesn't compete anymore, and what did he do? He immediately started volunteering and setting up all these great comps, which, to be honest with you, we've been lucky enough in Illinois. It's kind of been the way it goes. We have these great climbers that have stopped competing, and then they start setting up the comps, and it just makes the competitions even better because they've done them, so they're more fun. That's
always my goal. Setting climbing, setting out is like, it's got to be elegant.
Yeah, it's a great. They set up these climbs, and you're like, man, these guys have done it before, because it makes a big difference when you have experienced climbers setting up a great comp. It makes it a much better experience.
Yeah, and every chapter is different. Like some chapters they don't have that competent person,
right?
So they're using somebody with an aerial lift,
right?
And usually those climbs they're just not fun.
Well, one year I had an injury and I didn't compete, and my brother and I actually set up at Cantina Park where I work, and it is a lot of work just to set up a work climb, just to make it so that it fits in the right amount of time, and you have to consider that maybe how fast you climb it isn't how fast the lowest guy in the field is going to climb, or that new guy. So it's a pain in the butt setting that up to make sure it gets done in 5 minutes by most of the field, but at the same time challenging enough for the top end where it's fun to watch and fun to do. So it's not easy. It's surprisingly difficult.
It takes a lot of work to set up a masters, and it takes up a lot of work to set up a work climb.
Yeah.
The other events are a little bit easier, but a work climb, like you mentioned, you got a rainbow of people who are going to go through that event.
Yeah.
And I've been to events where 3/4 of the field didn't finish that event because it was too difficult.
It's not fun.
It's not fun, and they don't come back.
No.
Right?
They feel defeated.
So with the work positioning system, so this is set up for a moving rope right now. So I'm not going to take this all apart, but if it was a gear inspection, I would. I would demand that the competitor takes this completely off. So this is terminated with knots, right? So there needs to be a certain amount of tail, which is 10% of the diameter.
I believe four times the diameter, I believe.
I don't remember.
Check your ANSI standard.
Look in the rule book. Read the rule book.
We should know this.
You should know that one, I'm checking that. Obviously, the connecting links, we're doing the exact same thing. Checking all those connecting links. See, timing's off on that one.
Yeah.
Feel it.
Take a look. I like these little carabiners too there. Oh, yeah.
A little bit of timing.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yep.
Still very functional.
And like Todd said, like normally when you do the gear inspection, they kind of want it in the sections for what you're going to use it for, but it's all taken off. That way it's fast, it's easy. Here's another example. We have here a zigzag, which, it's a little different for the inspection. The Achilles heel on this one is these links, right? The number one thing when they first came out is you have to make sure you inspect each of these individual links. It's mechanical. If somebody misconfigures it and loads it sideways, easy to do a lot of damage to it. I mean, they're overbuilt, but it's still something that you have to inspect. The early models of this was, this rubber gap wasn't here. It was together, and they found that it was bending because, the way it was manufactured. And they did a really good job identifying that quickly. But the point is, if you don't inspect your gear properly, you miss those things, and this is primary life support. Another thing, this is a chicane that goes with it. This particular tool is for doing for single lining on this stationary rope. So when you look at that, one of the things you need to know if you're going to buy one of these is that these Petzl carabiners are the only ones that'll fit in this tool. So you don't go and buy it and then you can't use it and you're all bummed out.
And don't try to modify the hole so you get a different carabiner.
That's right. Don't drill a hole in it. Don't do anything foolish like that because it's not going to pass, and more importantly, it's not going to be safe, and you might compromise that tool. And this portion of the tool, even though it really just creates friction, it's part of your life support system. So you want to take a look at it and make sure that there's no burrs or anything in there or damage that might abrade the rope rapidly. One of the big things on the rope wrench, actually, that I have made this mistake is that it has this pin, right? It has this little slick pin in here, and it has a little retention. I don't know, what would you call that? Retention pin? Yeah, retention
spring-loaded.
Pin. Spring-loaded retention portion there, right? If you make the mistake of pushing it in and not clipping it, just barely, right? Just like that, and it looks almost right. And that rolls down your rope, it rotates down, and that sharp pin goes right in your rope and instantly shreds it. Because all your weight's on it. I did that a few years ago, and I never made that mistake again. Luckily, it was not fatal. I was running on a kern mantle rope, and most of the kern mantle rope, most of the load is on the core.
Yep.
So luckily the damage to the cover was superficial enough. It wasn't an issue. But little things like that when you're climbing, that's not exactly inspection, but good housekeeping. You check everything before you fly on it and make sure it's all set up properly.
So with the gear inspection, they're very, very thorough. They're documented. I recommend doing that at work. We do peer-to-peer gear inspections. Once a quarter, it's documented,
okay.
And then corrections are made. We do that. We don't do that in the field. We do that actually at the shop. So if there's a tool, it's almost always connecting links.
Right.
That's not working properly. We make that correction, whether it's fixing that tool or replacing it. So we spent quite a bit of time on gear inspections, and they're going to go through everything. And then if you do make it to the Masters Challenge, they're going to inspect your gear again,
right?
Just for that event. And we're just about out of time, but I definitely want to thank Russo again for letting us use their facility and for actually doing the recording.
Todd Kramer from Kramer Tree, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. And thanks to Cantini Park for letting me come out and do this instead of working.
Hope you guys enjoy your summer conference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good day. Bye.